Eliminating water poverty goes beyond just quenching someone's thirst. It also eliminates many inequalities that millions of Indians face today. It eliminates gender inequality. With clean water, we empower women to rise above becoming water wives. It eliminates corruption and economic predators. With access to wells in communities, water mafias are put out of business. It eliminates economic hardship in rural communities. With access to irrigation water, farmers can support themselves and their families. It eliminates political unrest. With access to the most basic human need, we create a more harmonious society. What starts with a drop of water ripples outward, promoting solutions for gender inequality, economic mobility, civic pride, and climate change. When you eliminate water poverty, you create a better India.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to OVBI's 7th session on our water technology series. We're very excited to have you here, and on behalf of OVBI, we welcome you to this series. We're fortunate to have a wonderful conversation with Shubo Biswas, the CEO of an exciting social technology startup called GreenGood Labs, and BV Jagadeesh, the co-chair of OVBI's water initiatives. Let me quickly introduce them both before I hand over the session to BVG. Shubo Biswas is a technology with over 25 years of experience in the high-tech industry, and his startup GreenGood Labs focused on delivering satellite imagery-based insights to organizations such as OVBI, working in the areas of water, agriculture, river, forests, etc. Shubo is also the global CTO of Deshpande Foundation, founded by Dr. Gururaj Deshpande and Jayashree Deshpande, where he supports teams working on farm ponds, farmer-produced organizations, better cotton initiatives, rural skilling programs, micro-entrepreneurship, and startups. Prior to his current roles, Shubo worked in Google in Mountain View, where he was the automation and robotics leader for all of Google's data center operations. And prior to that, Shubo was the chief architect of factory automation and robotics at Boeing Corporation. Conversing with Shubo is the co-chair of OVBI's water initiative, BV Jagadeesh. BV Jagadeesh is the managing director at Kaj Ventures. He has successfully invested and successfully guided companies such as Nutanix, Yodlee, Arkin, Elasticbox, NetMagic Solutions, just to name a few. Before founding Kaj Ventures, BV Jagadeesh served as the founding investor and CEO of Netscaler, which was successfully sold to Citrix. Prior to Netscaler, he co-founded and served as CTO of Exodus Communications, founded in 1993, that pioneered the concept of internet data centers. He was instrumental in the successful IPO of Exodus in 1998. Currently, Jagadeesh is an active investor and serves on the board of several Silicon Valley startups. He's also an adjunct faculty at the Levy School of Business. Along with OVBI, BV Jagadeesh is also very actively involved in several nonprofits for the betterment of the world, such as the UVCE Foundation, which provides scholarships to deserving students, One School at a Time, which constructs school buildings for the underprivileged, Akshay Patra, which provides midday meals to over 1.6 million children every day. I now invite BV Jagadeesh to kickstart this fascinating conversation with Shubo.
Thank you.
Yeah. Manu, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. And Shubo, very, very nice to have you here. It's always been a pleasure interacting with you, especially ever since we met about 6 months ago or so. And I've been fascinated with the kind of work that you're doing. And especially, that work is so applicable to the OVBI work that we are doing in India. And, with OVBI, we started our water rejuvenation initiative several years ago, and we have been fairly successful in transforming hundreds of villages from a very drought-struck kind of a situation into real green and changing the economy of these locations and so on and so forth. Obviously, the problem is very massive, right? Considering the drought situation and excess of water and no water and things like that. This has been extremely challenging. And of course, being in the heart of Silicon Valley, we cannot be just addressing all of these problems only from a very rudimentary and a crude ad hoc kind of a basis. So we need to really leverage technology. I mean, that is the reason as to why we are here in Silicon Valley. And if we don't apply the technologies to optimize things and to proactively look at issues, and even after implementing, observing how the results are, because that's what helps us to go back to our donors to go and actually show the results, right, in a very scientific methodologies. And finding you is really like a blessing in disguise for us. And it's really, really wonderful to have you here today to share your, entire insights into all the satellite imaging and all of those things that you have solved over so many years. But before we get on to this conversation, tell us what got you as a high-tech professional. You could have been a software engineer at Google, making a ton of money and being very happy and all that stuff. But you took a very conscious decision that is, not the life that you want to be spending for the rest of your life. You want to contribute to the environment. You want to do something good to the society. You want to do something very useful. And with all the technology knowledge that you have, how do you apply that into an environmental kind of issue and for the good of the society? So why don't you just take us through the journey of how you got involved with this?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity to have this discussion with you, BVG. It's my privilege and honor to have this opportunity, and you have pretty much written the textbook on how to go about starting companies, venture capitalism, philanthropy. So if anything, I'm taking a page off of your book in the journey that I have taken on. So the way I came into this field is I've been in the technology field for more than 25 years. And what I realized was that the best use of technology was when it was in service of humanity. And when I was at Google, I had the good fortune to start working with a number of NGOs in India who are working in the area of water. So one of the most prominent ones is Pani Foundation, founded by Shri Amir Khan and his wife Kiran Rao, and with the guidance of their able CEO, Mr. Satyajit Bhatkal, I was able to learn a lot about what was going on in the ground. I was out there in Maharashtra, digging watershed structures with villagers. Last year, I participated in their water cup and started working with other organizations, including Isha Foundation and OVBI, of course. That got me really spooled up on and energized about the vastness and complexity of these projects. And it became more and more evident to me that if technology is meant to do good, it should be doing service right here in this space. And fortunately, there are lots of good technologies that have come on, which we'll be talking about, that can really help visualize and reveal the stories that are happening in these large spaces over long periods of time. And so that has been the most exciting journey that I have been on personally for the last 2.5, 3 years, and hope to share a few of some clips of what we have discovered along the way with you and the audience here.
Yeah, that's really remarkable. I mean, we are here to learn all the great things that you have done, and on behalf of audience and even for my own benefit, can you share with us a little bit about this whole satellite-based remote sensing and how exactly it works and how it can benefit, especially the water-related projects that we are working on in the remote parts of India, right? Because sure, these are not even close to main cities. So these are like hundreds of miles away from big cities. So right, show us what this whole thing technology is about.
Sure. So what I'll do is I'll switch to a couple of slides and maybe 3 or 4 slides and explain at a very high level how does this technology work and what do we do in GreenGood Labs to use this technology to be able to extract valuable insights that can then support ground operations. So about 4 or 5 slides that we'll be going through just to give a primer on what we do at GreenGood Labs, as well as what is this satellite technology all about. Okay, so let me go ahead and queue up my slides here. And can we have the slides, please? All right, thank you. So this is all about geospatial intelligence, that are powering action plans on the ground. And how does this happen, and how do we go about doing it? So in a very simplistic manner, what we do in GreenGood Labs is we support operations on the ground with Geospatial Intelligence powered self-help tools. The key is tools that can actually be used by an end user on the ground to empower and inform themselves and guide them. And the way we do it is by consolidating four pieces of, four groups of information and people. So we bring in petabytes of satellite data sets. A petabyte is 10 to the 15 bytes, so 10 to the raised to 15, so 30 or 40 petabytes of data, along with algorithms that have AI algorithms, computer vision, image processing, data science algorithms. And then we combine that with the deep talent in all of the organizations that you're seeing listed here at this point: Foundation, Pani Foundation, OVBI, Art of Living, Isha Foundation, folks who are actually on the ground with ground intelligence. We combine it with their expertise, and of course bring in global talent. And we combine all of that to extract intelligence out of these algorithms and provide it to the to folks on the ground.
These global partners is like NGOs who are
these
on the ground.
Who are on the ground doing various large climate-friendly operations like farm ponds, like river rejuvenation, like watershed management, so on and so forth. OVBI, of course.
Okay.
So here's an overview of what the technology actually looks like, right? So on the left-hand side, you're seeing a visual here. Let me turn my pointer on. And you can see that there are many satellites that are going around the Earth, geostationary as well as non-geostationary satellites that are taking images. The good thing is, in the last 10 or 20 years, a lot of this imagery has been made available in the public space. These images are not just in the visible band. They happen to pretty much span a large part of the infrared, spectrum, as well as the ultraviolet spectrum, as well as the electromagnetic spectrum. So it's not just the visible light, range itself. They also have satellites that take imagery using radar. And these images can be taken as frequently as multiple times a day to as infrequently as maybe once a month. But all of these images are being streamed down to Earth and being stored in large public databases and available for further processing. And these images are coming from the European Space Agency, NASA, the Indian Space Agency, ISRO. So what we do here in GreenGood Labs is we access this imagery and we run algorithms on them. The computer vision, AI, data science algorithms, and we extract intelligence out of these images. And these intelligence are extremely useful in scoping and guiding and tackling these large environmental problems. Okay. So these are the areas on the left-hand side: river rejuvenation.
But by the way, these satellites, the pictures that you showed,
yes,
are they from different countries?
Yes, so they happen to be constellations managed by the European Space Agency. There are constellation of satellites managed by NASA, and there are, of course, a group of satellites managed by ISRO. So it's a whole bunch of satellites.
And you don't need to pay to subscribe to that data.
Most of the data that I'm accessing is available in the free public domain. So we don't have to pay. Of course, there are data sets that are higher resolution and taken more frequently, for which there is a cost to the data. Fortunately, for the kinds of work that we are talking here, a bulk of it can be done with data that doesn't have to be paid for.
Got it. Okay.
And more data sets are coming on live in the public domain every day. Okay. So what we do in GreenGood Labs is we take the intelligence out of this data and make it available through simple self-help tools in smartphones, in the browser, with no installation to the end user. And you'll see some examples in just a little bit. And the intent is to support any of these large geo-transformation projects across the 4 stages a project goes through. So a typical project goes through its assessment phase, where you're trying to understand a very large area, let's say 100,000 square kilometers, and trying to understand where exactly are the people hurting and for what, where are we having desertification, where are we starving for water, where is the water table going down. So we provide the insight to do the initial assessment, then we go into providing insights for planning, and then once you're done with planning, when you actually are executing to the plan, we allow for insights to deploy and monitor on a real-time basis. And then post-deployment is the impact analysis and monitoring of the benefits. So through all of these stages, these technologies help, right? All right, so what does this technology actually look like? Let's look at an example, right? So when we typically think about a satellite image, if you go into Google Maps, what you're going to see is something like the image on the left-hand side. This is a typical satellite image, and it's useful. It's better than what we used to have before, let's say, 20 years ago. But if you really wanted to understand, the red arrow there is pointing to a village. If you really wanted to understand what is the life of a person in that village, what's going on there, what are their challenges, how do they address their challenges, how can I help them? If you really get down to this, an image like the one on the left-hand side is really not that helpful. It doesn't tell you the hidden story. However, by taking hundreds and thousands of these images and collating them across many, many years and running computer vision algorithm, what we get out is the story on the right-hand side. So what do we see on the right-hand side? It's very interesting because what seems like a river on the left-hand side is actually a very dynamic body that has 8 dams. And you can see the different places the water is being held back and the water is being pulsed forward. You can see the different fields that are being used at different points in time. The orange indicates fields that are being used for winter cropping. The yellow indicates fields that are having crops during the post-monsoon summer cropping. And of course, on the west side of the river, you're seeing a lot of fields that have water. The little black dots represent water bodies. So there are a lot of agricultural fields that have water and yet no crops. And you would wonder what's going on there. Now, this is the kind of insight we get, right? So it turns out that those are the fields that either are having very low soil organic carbon, so infertile soil, or they don't have a way to irrigate their land. They don't have access to electricity and other solar, electric, pumps and things like that. So these are the kinds of insights that come out.
So this is the one on the right is basically taking the left picture from multiple satellites or whatever, applying your algorithms specifically related to farming and agriculture and water and so on and so forth, and then deriving these details. Is that what it is?
Exactly. So it's taking hundreds and thousands of images that are taken across a long period of time on the left-hand side, stitching them together, running AI and computer vision algorithms on it, and then pulling out one color composite that kind of tells the comprehensive story of what's going on. And with that kind of insight, now an organization like OVBI can engage with this community, saying, look, we have digitally immersed ourselves in this space. We understand what's going on. Cross-check our views and findings with the villagers and really go and intervene in a manner that makes a meaningful difference in their lives. So now, like I said, if we are looking for an opportunity to make a meaningful difference, we can go and address the fields on the western part of the river and say, how can we help you access the water that you have? How can we help remedy the soil organic content? How can we make your fields abundant and fertile, right? So this is the kind of insight you would have. You would never have this insight were you to look at the image on the left-hand side, right? So this is the hidden story that we can find from
Got it. Wow, that's pretty awesome. Yeah. Really awesome.
And there are lots of other examples, but we'll come back to that as the conversation proceeds.
So now, I just want to ask from OVBI perspective, since we are addressing the water-related issues, and the water table, which is several hundred feet below the ground level, right? Do you have the ability to actually detect even these water tables are drying out? So because that's the kind of data that would be valuable to us in order for us to really go and tackle the problem.
Right. Fortunately, the government of India has started a scheme where it has started putting probes and sensors in deep bore wells and beginning to, so think of these as IoT devices scattered across hundreds and thousands of them scattered all over India, just like they have weather stations on ground to collect weather data. Now, government of India has started putting these probes into wells and deep bore wells. So that data is beginning to come into the public space. Again, this is not satellite imagery, but this is IoT sensor-based data that we can track and we can bring into our maps. And it gives us a general topographic terrain map of how the water tables are below the ground level. So that's the direct evidence coming from these sensors. We also look at anecdotal evidence of water. So if you have an abundance of greenery and the vegetation index is improving, that is indicative of good water in the soil and good water table. Because you could never have good vegetation and forestry if the water tables are not accessible, right? So
Yeah.
there are all kinds of direct as well as anecdotal indirect ways of assessing the access to water, especially when it comes to water under the ground.
Yeah. One of the challenges that we want to start addressing is not only the problem that has already happened, right? That means a village has already gone through a drought situation and then severe water kind of issues, which is kind of the situation that we are seeing now.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe that to some extent, we should also start looking at addressing these problems proactively, meaning when a village or a region is transforming from a good agricultural kind of a place into a drought kind of a situation, right? So is there a way you can proactively track these things to alert us that, hey, why don't you go take a look at this place, because this place could become a very serious issue 5 years down the road or 8 years down the road, because fixing that problem today is a lot cheaper and a lot faster as well, right? You agree with that?
Yes, absolutely, BVG, 100%. I think the nature of these problems are such that, first of all, they're happening over a very vast area. So one human person cannot visually see all of this unless you have technology to assist you. And secondly, they are having slowly creeping over a long period of time. So it often creeps up on a community and catches them off guard. But by then the problem has become very acute. So how can satellite imagery help here, right? Because this is exactly the place where satellite imagery can be watching these trends, these global patterns, and act as an early warning system where it sees a certain trend. It knows how this trend progresses because it has watched and seen these trends play out in other parts of the world, in other parts of India. And by knowing that, we can see the early warning, the signatures of the symptoms, and we can caution communities. I'll illustrate this with specific examples. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
So let's take this particular example here. Let's say
you want to go into the slide mode?
Yes. Let me go ahead here and show an example of a slide here. So this is what we call hotspots mapping, right? So this is a satellite imagery. Again, satellite imagery being used over a long period of time to identify parts of your area of interest that are suffering from chronic barren conditions and chronic high temperatures, right? So the red spots are showing the spots that get particularly hot, that are barren, and that don't have any trees. The soil condition is degrading. All the soil aggregate structure is gone. The microorganisms are pretty much diminished, and it starts creating this heat dome effect. And what the heat dome effect does is start this progressive negative cycle of less and less rains and more desertification. So if we can find these hotspots early using satellite imagery and start intervening using soil restoration through grasslands, through tree plantation, and through very surgical interventions, we can start reversing this trend, and we can arrest this at stage 1 rather than stage 4, by which time the lands are denuded, the soils are completely desertified, and there's a tremendous amount of almost 20x, 30x more expense, like you mentioned, to try to reverse it at that point versus reversing it early. So
is this the picture that you are showing? Is this from what you described? Is that stage 1, or this is already past stage 1?
In this particular case, this is, I would say, stage 3 or stage 4, because the land is already denuded. The soil is bare. it bakes and creates this heat dome in summer. And so in this particular case, we are seeing it after it has become reasonably desertified. But we could see the very early signatures by looking at places that are beginning to lose vegetation. And
how does that image look like?
So that would be, so we can do spatial temporal images that are showing the progressive reduction in vegetation in a particular area.
I see.
And so you would see tree cover that is reducing, and the image will show you how much of the tree cover is reducing, and then we can use that to guide the next stage of activity. Saying, okay, this particular area is showing a marked reduction in vegetation, which means that unless we intervene now, the next thing that is going to happen is after the tree cover is gone, you're going to start losing the bushes. After the bushes are gone, you're going to lose the next layer of vegetation, which is the grasses. And then after the grasses are gone, now you have bare ground. And very soon the microbial life is going to go, and then soil is going to become, dusty. It's going to start blowing away. You're going to lose your soil cover and topsoil, and it's just a negative, cycle from there on. So these early warning systems definitely are now available by virtue of technology, and we can bring them to bear in running our projects.
Yeah, I think this is something that we should start engaging with you to start figuring out, maybe 10-15% of the projects that we are investing in could be for projects that are heading in that direction, so that we track them early on, and then we do the intervention early on, so that for a very small investment, we can actually save the future damage that could potentially happen to these particular regions. Yeah. So you talked about vegetation. I mean, that's a very important and interesting topic, because if you study this Isha Foundation, which is driving once again this whole water rejuvenation, one of the big things that they are driving is the tree plantation, right? Especially across all the banks of the rivers and everything, because tree is the one that holds the water and also the soil to get into the lakes and canals and other things. So that's what results in silt. So they're pushing very hard in planting lots of trees, across the whole nation, which is good. I mean, even based on some of the statistics we heard last week as well from Dr. Ratan Lal. So my question to you is that when you talk about vegetation, you cannot just plant any kind of trees, right? It has to be very likely native kind of plants, because I'll tell you, from my own village experience that I have, some 15, 20, 30 years back, when the village started to transform because all the jobs were happening in the cities. So many of these villagers started to work in cities, and now a lot of these agricultural lands started to become barren because there are no workers, right? All the farmers, they're all going to the city to take up regular jobs, which is, by the way, true in many of the villages that are near to big cities, right?
Exactly.
Because villagers are all moving to the cities to take up jobs. So many of the farmers, instead of leaving the land barren, they ended up planting these eucalyptus trees. And eucalyptus trees, the property of that is it actually sucks up more water from this water table, and it leads to more dryness, and the entire water table in that entire region completely got dried out. So in fact, the village became very, very dry over the last 15, 20 years. So what are your thoughts and your observations on that?
Right. Thank you, BVG, for asking that question. This is one of the most pressing problems where things done with good intent sometimes end up having bad consequences, because either all the consequences weren't thought of through early on, right? So how do we detect something like this, and how do we intervene with something like this, right? So and the hard problem here is that visually, if you were to fly on an airplane and fly over these lands that have eucalyptus plantations, especially mixed in with old growth forests, it's very hard to visually distinguish where these plantations are and just the expanse and extent of this problem. But fortunately, with the help of image processing and satellite technology, it's now possible to quantify exactly where these plantations are and how much of the area is now under acacia or eucalyptus and those kinds of water-intensive agroforestry. And once we know and can visualize the problem, just like the hotspots that I was showing, it's then possible to then have a meeting of minds of different organizations, government agencies, the forest department, philanthropic organizations, NGOs, people with the intent to try and solve this problem can come together, visualize it, assess the impact, see the trends, and then try and come up with a plan to intervene in the right way so that ultimately it's good for the farmer, good for the society.
Excellent, excellent. There is this perception, right, that technology is going to be very expensive. So because organizations like us, which are non-profit organizations, we thrive based on raising money from our donors, and we want to make sure that we use the money very wisely, especially on burning issues, right? But that does not mean we should not spend money on technology, because overall, this should help in optimizing the whole thing so that our efforts is extremely efficient, so that every dollar that we spend is spent wisely. And the overall results, right, have to be, you have a greater chance of actually succeeding using the technology. So can you take us through, the perception of this technology being expensive into how exactly these technologies can be used for organizations like OVBI to make it very impactful and very, very efficient, so that we can take these things and articulate this to our donors?
Sure, absolutely. So I think that's a very important part of how technology can be truly helping. Because if it's cost prohibitive, then at some point, just access to the technology itself becomes a friction. So the goodness it can create cannot happen, right? So first of all, one of the positive trends in the space of satellite imagery and image processing and remote sensing is that a lot of these data sets are now coming into the free public domain, right? So in terms of what used to be the biggest technical barrier in doing this kind of science and doing this kinds of processing, I think a lot of that barrier is being lowered, if not removed completely. The second part of it is that, yes, a lot of this processing is very computation intensive. AI algorithms have to be done over thousands of nodes and cores. But again, the good thing is with cloud computing, a lot of this can be offloaded and done at a fairly minimal cost, with cloud computing costs coming down. Now, that's on the input side. On the output side, let me share some numbers, right? So in our discussions with AOL, what we found is, as they're looking at the river rejuvenation projects across all of Karnataka, we did a rough back of the envelope calculation that by use of these kinds of technologies, they could be saving close to 200,000 hours, a very conservative estimate, to create their action plans. Because what it does, it provides them insights that they would have to otherwise painfully go and mine out and discover through very human-intensive processes. But in the kinds of examples I just showed you, you get these insights surfaced earlier. So we are balancing human talent with computation talent, and it's saving 200,000 hours of labor and human cost is not trivial. And that's just for one state. If you can take that and scale it across different states, it just multiplies from there on, right? So these are the ways that technologies can make a meaningful difference in the capital investment into these projects. One more point. So in terms of the benefit to the person on the end user, these technologies are almost frictionless because they run, and I'm going to show you in some examples of what this looks like to the end user, right, through the applications. They can run in a frictionless manner inside a web browser that runs on your smartphone, and all you need to do is just be able to access it. And it's near to no cost for folks on the ground to access this imagery, especially the insights coming from this imagery. So, I think there is a perception. We are trying to reduce the apprehension about use of technology, but I think technology is at a point where it can really start serving at this point.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, just like in high technology, when you sell, one has to look at the total cost of operations. Right. So it's not just the investment that you are making, which could look like it is expensive, but if you look at the entire total cost of operations, if you can make that operations to become very efficient, so that, as you said earlier, it's the application of our resources is very surgical. You actually do the work in very, very specific locations rather than doing it in a very broad manner, so that renting of these equipment or labor or every other things, time, all of those things that we spend can be highly optimized using this technology. So if you look at the complete end-to-end cost of the project, it should actually work out to be a lot cheaper with the technology.
And let me share one more example, BVG, because I think this is also a cost that often comes and becomes a huge impediment to organizations like OVBI, right? So this is the cost of post-implementation impact analysis, right? So often we do these huge projects across, let's say, hundreds of kilometers, and after we have done the project, we need to send people out on the ground to actually do polling and sampling and impact analysis, right? So the post-project implementation, the impact analysis ends up being a huge cost to many NGOs that I have worked with, including OVBI, right? Because surveying and sending people on the ground, and especially in the times like now with COVID and the restrictions with COVID, doing this kinds of on-the-ground impact analysis becomes very expensive, very time-consuming, and constrained logistically, right? How would it be if we can do impact analysis using satellite imagery? Do it fast, do it on a recurring basis, and make these kinds of tools available at the fingertips of organizations like OVBI, organizations like AOL, and your donor community, right? How would it be if you could make it available? So let me share an example. So here's an example of a village where watershed management was done. You can see a farm pond here. Let me turn my pointer on. And here's a farm pond that was created. This was created in 2016. And the question was, has this farm pond made a meaningful difference to the community in its vicinity, to the fields in its vicinity? And what you're seeing here is a graph of the normalized differential vegetation index. And what you can see is this, there is a change, the peaks and troughs of how this vegetation index changes over the years. But by and large, what we can see is through satellite image analysis that this is trending towards the positive side. It's improving. So the intervention was done in 2016, and post 2016, the NDVI of the fields around that particular farm pond are showing better and better NDVI. So this is a clear signature, a clear evidence that the prosperity of the fields in the vicinity have been materially improved, and the odds have improved, and we are getting better crops, better vegetation, better greenery, and better crops because of the intervention we have done. Now, imagine if we had to go and do that by physically going there, right? You would have, how many fields can you visit? How many times can you visit them? But you can do this on a recurring basis as many times as you want using this technology.
Yeah. So I guess what you're saying or showing here, what you're showing here is if I'm a donor and if I'm contributing to OVBI to help rejuvenate or fix the problem in certain villages in Maharashtra, then after we fix the problems, then we can also leverage your technology to get the images post our intervention. We can continuously get the images of the progress that is being made, as well as the post impact of how the village has now transformed into growing the grains and so on and so forth, which will have a positive economic impact. So, and they can all look at this data from their browser pretty much.
Exactly, right. So one clear sign of prosperity is if a field used to lie barren, now we have gone from a barren field to one crop a year to two crops a year. That is a clear trend towards things improving for the better. If we can show that more farm ponds are now filled with water for more longer periods of time in a year, that's a sign of prosperity, right? And these are all. So I see this technology as being eyes in the sky and also an early warning system and helping out find these trends, both in the positive and negatives, and helping the donor communities identify and prioritize and engage.
Yeah.
So
basically at every project level, right, you have the ability to track with as much granularity as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, this technology obviously is something that people in Silicon Valley can use very freely. But what about, how do you engage this kind of technology to individual farmers or donor communities and creating and showing the impact and so on and so forth, right? How do you bring this to the lowest level to make sure that everybody benefits out of this?
Sure. So let me show how all of this technology, which can seem overwhelming and very complex, can be made extremely user friendly and be delivered to very simple user interfaces to the user on the ground, right? So I'm going to switch to the topic of floods, which is the kind of the other side of the coin of drought, right? Because we are talking about water, and water has two aspects to it. Either we have too much of it or too less of it, and we seem to be, as we get more and more acute with climate change, we seem to be having this huge spikes between too much water, as we are seeing now. Vast areas of India are now suffering from flooding, and which can be surfaced. So I'm going to show how the flooding conditions can be shown and identified, and how we can help with disaster relief using imagery. But on the other side, the same imagery also indicate a future impending drought condition, because all the places that are now suffering from flood are losing silt and topsoil and the the fields, and are eventually going to lose because of the loss of water, going to drought. So how do we actually present this, right? So let me share an example of that and show how this can be made extremely easy to use for the user on the ground. So if you can see the slides, please. So this is about flood detection and disaster relief using satellite imagery. This is an application that runs in the browser. This was built by GreenGood Labs and was made available to users all over the world, especially the users who are in the Gangetic Plain of northern India. Because in the month of July and August and parts of September, northern India, the Gangetic Plain has received exceptionally heavy amount of rain. And the intent here is to provide a free application to all the folks who are in these affected zones. This is, by the way, 12 to 14 states, going all the way from New Delhi all the way to Arunachal Pradesh. And millions and millions of farmers and individuals who live in the fields there. So what you're seeing is a user interface on the left-hand side that is running inside a smartphone browser or a desktop application, a desktop browser. And you are seeing the before imagery. So you can see the river network in the Gangetic Plain. The Brahmaputra River is the one on the east side of the image. And let me turn my pointer on. And you see what things look like before the flooding happened, right? Over on the right-hand side is the image of the same place based on satellite imagery. We have been able to find out exactly the areas which have been flooded. Now imagine the power of this technology if you are on the ground and you are assisting with disaster relief, or you need help, or you need to identify and send resources to the most needy areas. With the power of this kind of imagery, and you can zoom in and zoom out and go down to the field level, to the house level. Right now you're seeing a fairly zoomed out view of it. You can find out your affected zones exactly, almost on a near real-time basis, and you can react to these conditions. So this kind of imagery has been made available to the disaster relief organizations of India. It has been made to the general public, and of course to government agencies. So everybody from top down to the individual on the ground who is experiencing these problems has access to this imagery, and we can all rally around. Once we can visualize the problem, we can rally around and send help. So this is the way we can provide the power of this technology through self-help tools in a low friction or no friction manner to the end user.
Fantastic.
Turn the slides on.
If I may ask, can you share some case studies or live examples of the work that you have done with several of the foundations that you have been working, and what kind of impact or results have you created so far?
Sure. So let me share the kind of work that we have been doing, and then also share a little bit about the impact. You saw one example of the impact when I showed vegetation index improving. But let me show this example here that I think is quite a powerful way of understanding which villages actually need help, and where within the village do we actually need to provide help, right? So this is something that we call the asset utilization index. In this case, the asset happens to be the farmer's field. And what you're seeing here is a river going down the middle of the image. This is, again, just to give some context, this is an image that has been generated out of processing thousands of images of this place and then generating insights. So what you're seeing is a result of the image processing, the output of the image processing with some color coding on it. So let me explain what's going on. So what you're seeing are the fields, and the different fields have different colors. Of course, there is a big reservoir here on the left-hand side. There is a river that is dry running down the middle, and then you have these fields here. Now, the fields that are green in color are the ones that are exhibiting the maximum amount of activity throughout the year. So this is where vigorous farming is happening. Obviously, these fields happen to be in the proximity of the river, proximity of water. And then you have these other colors. Yellow and orange suggest progressively lesser activity, lesser number of months, and red is even less, but still some activity is there. And then you have some fields that are completely dark. Those are the fields there is absolutely no farming activity being detected. So in terms of distress and farmers who need help, these are the fields that need help. These are the farmers who need help. These are the folks who are not able to generate income and revenue for themselves by using the asset, and they are not able to utilize the asset. So if we were trying to help those farmers, how can we help? Right? First of all, how can we even know how many farmers are there and where they are located? This helps us know. And then how can we help? Well, in terms of how we can help, it's interesting because even within these barren areas, there are farmers who are able to generate crops. You can see them right here. They don't have proximity to water, and yet they're able to generate, crops. The question is, how are they doing it? Do they have deep bore wells? Do they have, special access to water? Do they have farm ponds? And so there are good examples that we can replicate, in spite of the fact that they are not in the proximity of a river or a large reservoir, right? So these are the kinds of insights we can have. This is the way we can digitally immerse ourselves, and then we can engage and help these communities in a much more informed way, rather than trying to go in and try to discover this, And so, that's just an example of how we can, assess the problem, right? In terms of impact, since you asked that question, let me go ahead and share this one slide about impact. So this is the village Kadvanchi in Maharashtra, where through the help of AOL, they were able to almost double or maybe triple the number of farm ponds they had, and their GDP went from 77 lakhs to 75 crores. Wow. What analysis is showing is exactly how much the farm pond count and surface area proliferated before and after intervention. So before 2016, you can see the yellow bodies, those were the water bodies they had, and then after 2016, you had all these additional water bodies that were added to the mix. And so there is a clear evidence on the ground that is adding to the assessment of the dramatic improvement in the GDP of the village. So hopefully these examples help illustrate how this technology can be helpful. We can go to this now.
So thanks to Art of Living for their intervention here and all the effort. And in fact, OVBI is mainly driven by the Art of Living. So we are actually blessed by the Art of Living organization, and we work very, very closely with Art of Living in many of these regions as well. So It's been such a pleasure actually working with them to solve these problems. There are a couple of questions that have come up, and I just want to let people know that they can post more questions if they want. Then we could perhaps maybe take some of those questions as well. So there is a question here that talks about you're dealing with petabytes of data. can you shed more light on specific technology components, both on cloud as well as on the edge, to make this mission possible?
Sure. So these petabytes of data are hosted across different public servers. The European Space Agency has its own ways of disseminating this data. Google has a huge amount of public data sets that it has curated and made available through its Google Earth engine and similar forums. And likewise, there are public data sets that have been made available through Maxar Technologies, through other agencies that are in this space of sharing satellite imagery. So the Indian government has also contributed to this space. There is a lot of data sets that Indian government has put into the public space from Cartosat and other satellites, and more data sets are coming into this space. So the data sets themselves are coming in, and more petabytes are getting added, almost a petabyte a month. Of data, I would say, if I can estimate the rate at which these new data sets are coming in. Remember that this is not a static data set. This is a live data set. So not only we have historical data, but every day new data is being captured by the satellites and being streamed into this backend. And as far as the hosting of the data, most of this data is in the cloud, with caching on the edge computer layer. So to the questioner, the latency between where the data resides and making it available to the application on the ground is relatively low, because it's fairly well cached and accessible in remote parts of the world, where it can really make a difference. So as long as you have a cell phone that has reasonably good 3G or 4G connection, you can access this data, and it works in offline and online mode as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. There is a very interesting question here that has come up, given the fact that many of us here are in California and we experience this fire every year, and it's getting worse by the year. Is this technology something that can be used for early detection of this dryness and potential dangers, right? And it can be even avoided if possible. So is that something that is applicable using your technology?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that we can do is proactively anticipate where are the areas where we will be having a huge amount of dry biomass. So first of all, when we go into the growing season, we can detect which areas are getting more and more biomass, growth and vegetation. Especially if you have a good rainy season, that leads to an abundance of ground biomass, growing, tree cover as well as bushes and grasses, right? So we can see that trend going in, and then once we go into the dry season, we can start overlaying the weather maps and seeing, the soil moisture, the moisture in the air. We can say air humidity. We can start seeing all kinds of indicators that start showing that this huge biomass that has been created is now going to particularly dry conditions, right? So this is something that is very applicable to all of Western United States, where we are all, suffering from orange skies and epic levels of fires. But not only the United States, we have seen the almost epic level of fires in Australia, which have had a very situation. A very good monsoon with very good biomass, followed by a very dry and late monsoon, which led to the climatic fires they had last November or December, right? So clearly, this can act as an early warning system. This can be the eyes in the sky, and for folks like the fire department, this can definitely be a way to identify the areas they need to be watching closely. And even after the fire start, there is lots of imagery in Twitter that I have also shared that shows the fires live. So you can literally see the smoke and the flames coming out of the fire. So this is after the fires have happened. You can see and watch the fires happening. So it helps you visualize the scope of the problem.
Got it. There's another question. So I don't know if you have the answer for this. So it'll be good to hear the complete story of Kadvanchi. Are you familiar with it?
Yes, that was the village that that I was showing, and interestingly, they have had a long association with a variety of organizations. I know that Pani Foundation has had a huge contribution in the turning Kadvanchi around. They have had, of course, the engagement with Art of Living, AOL, and there are a number of other organizations. I apologize if I'm not able to recall all of their names. The way the village turned itself around is they happen to be into this high-end grape farming business. So they grow high-end grapes. They think of them as the Napa Valley of India, Maharashtra. And so they are into this very scientific high-end cash crop. And what they have been able to do is turn this relatively barren area with access to stable water. They've been able to generate tremendous amount of income by transforming a lot of their land from subsistence farming to scientific grape farming. So, so this has been the journey they have been, and that has led to the dramatic improvement in GDP.
I see. Are you familiar with this Gunj area, which apparently is also being very badly affected? Are you familiar with that?
I have heard about it. I can't claim to know too much about it.
Got it. Okay. Another interesting question that has come up. Some of coastal districts in Tamil Nadu having the salty water in their wells, it is believed it was due to excessive usage of bore wells and seawater entered into interior areas and water bodies.
Yes.
So is there a way this technology actually can detect how much of seawater entered into these water bodies? Actually, that's a very interesting question.
Right. So that's I think I would go back to the IoT network that the Indian government is setting up. That tells you not only the depth of the water in these probes, but also the salinity. Right. So that would be the direct way of accessing and getting metrics on how much this water is progressing inland. Of course, there is anecdotal evidence on the ground. So if you see loss of vegetation due to the water getting progressively more saline, that could be the secondary impact that is visible on the ground.
I see. I see. So we are running out of time. I just want to ask you one last question. Since you have just taken up the job as a CTO at Deshpande Foundation, are you going to continue to be involved in the water-related activities? Are you going to expand this into many other areas of how your technology can benefit agriculture, fire resistance, and various other problems that people face?
Right. Fortunately, with my opportunity to work with Dr. Deshpande, whom you know very well too, and all the areas that Deshpande Foundation is working on, I see more opportunities to apply this technology to amplify and scale what Deshpande Foundation does. So very quickly, Deshpande Foundation is into agriculture, into micro-entrepreneurship, into skilling, and into startups, and all in tier 2 and tier 3 cities and in small villages. So increasing the footprint of what they're doing, I think is possible using technologies like this.
Terrific. Terrific. Manu, it's all yours. Thank you.
Excellent. No, it's such a fascinating conversation. I wish we had more time to continue this. So, and Shubo, that was such a wonderful thing. Jagadeesh, BV Jagadeesh, thank you so much for leading this conversation. And Shubo, thank you for sharing all your insights around this. Right, to our viewers, we hope this session, it's been fascinating listening to it. For me, hopefully it was as insightful for you as well. OVBI Water is going to continue to bring these conversations, right, week after week, with experts, with entrepreneurs, with experts such as Shubo. And we're going to do this every Sunday at 10 a.m. PST, right, till about the end of November. So, and you can go to Eliminating Water Poverty. You can see the website down below, .org, and see the list of upcoming speakers, right? Many experts believe that we just have about a decade or so to address this challenge in India. It's a serious problem, right? So we need all the help we can get. India needs all the help she can get, right? And therefore, we would love all of you to participate in whatever way that is possible. Please pass on the information about the live series to all your friends and family. come and work with us, volunteer with us, educate other people, or donate in whatever capacity that you can, so that we can continue this work, right? We also want to let you know that a donation of $1,500 can provide water security for an entire village, right? That's 2,000 people. And the beauty about doing this with water is that once you solve that problem, it's just a problem that can be solved for their lifetimes, right? And as Shubo was showing, the impact, right, from 75 lakhs to 75 crores, right? The GDP impact is massive in water. So please do help us. Any contribution that you can do will help us in eliminating water poverty for India, right? And thank you again. Please.
One thing I just wanted to add, by volunteering for OVBI, you get to visit places that you would have never, ever have even thought of actually going to the places. And the hospitality in those places, despite all the challenges that these people have, the hospitality in how they feed you, how they take care of you, it is absolutely phenomenal experience. And I would highly encourage those of you who have the time, little bit of time, to come and volunteer for OVBI. And when you visit India, to go and actually visit these locations is a lifetime sort of an experience.
Yeah.
I would agree. I would agree 100%. I was there in Maharashtra last year, and it was such a spectacular experience for me. And to the audience, we just want to say thank you so much for joining us. We know that we were not able to get to all the questions that you asked. It was a very fascinating conversation. I know Shubo had his email address there, and I'm being presumptuous, but if they have questions, please free to reach out to Shubo. I think, is that all right, Shubo?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. And we'll see you next week, same time, with a new leader who's trying to solve this defining problem of our lifetimes, which is water. Thank you so much, and namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Manu. Thank you.